Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Connecting with the Coaches. Happy New Year 2024. Today, we're going to talk about what we wish counselors and therapists and social workers knew and understood about reactive attachment disorder. All of us at some point have seen counselors to help us with our family. And then we have clients who every day are coming to us saying, our counselors don't understand, our therapists don't understand, our social workers don't understand. And so we want to talk about why that is and what if maybe you want to send this to your counselor and have them watch it and see. So counselors, therapists, social workers, licensed professional counselors, mental health workers, we welcome you here. And this is not about, condemning you or anything, but we want to talk about why don't counselors understand about RAD? So the first thing that we wanted to share is that, we have all been to graduate level or postgraduate level school. And we've all seen that this is not taught. So certainly not at the master's degree level. We've asked at universities, why isn't this taught? And we've been told, well, you might be able to get something at the doctoral level. But Amy, you are actually getting your doctorate right now. Have you had anything on this?
If I want to bring it to the table, I can write about it and research about it, but it's not something that's brought up. Yeah,
Right,
it hasn't been
right,
something that's been brought up.
right. So most counselors or therapists have never had any training in this unless they've sought training from an outside source. And typically what we've found is that most of the training actually comes from parents who are raising kids with reactive attachment disorder rather than any organizations, because most people are not training on this. So there's also a stigma around reactive attachment disorder, and we found many counselors and therapists do not want to diagnose. It's kind of seen as like this, I don't want to say death sentence, but like a lot of therapists believe that it just can't be healed. There's nothing to do about it. So they don't want to label a child with this when it's so grim. But then also there's other therapists who believe that if we just put these kids in a loving family, they should be okay. And so then if they're not okay, it's the parents' fault. So Jen, do you want to share just a little bit about what I remember you had a book in your
Yes,
graduate studies. Tell us a little bit about that.
yes. I had a class on abnormal behavior and over the summer, and it had a section in one of the chapters about reactive attachment disorder, and I was, eager to read it and to see what it had to say. And so it basically was comprised of two paragraphs. The first paragraph described it really well. I felt like it did a good job describing the disorder. But the second paragraph went on to say that RAD can be cured in a loving, caring family. That upset me greatly
Yeah.
because I
And
know that if that was the cure, none of us that have adopted children with reactive attachment would be sitting in positions to be looking for solutions
right,
because we
right.
are loving, caring
That's so
family.
true.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, here are some things we want you to know. First of all, when therapists believe what Jen's textbook said, the parents are then blamed for the child's behavior. And typically it's adoptive or foster parents, but not always. Sometimes it's even a biological parent or a step parent or a grandparent or somebody who has taken guardianship or whatever of one of these children. So that's a challenging situation right there. We want you to understand that the trauma in these children, it's not their fault, absolutely, but it happened before the child came into the home. And I would say mostly, because bringing a child into a home like this is traumatic for the child. Adoption is traumatic. So now we are adding on their trauma. Foster care is traumatic.
Mhm.
So they've already had trauma. Now we're re-traumatizing them. And typically what happens is the intimacy of being in a family, of having a mother, having a father, is very traumatic for these kids. And so they're going to respond in a way to try to keep themselves safe, because it feels very challenging to them. It feels like I'm not going to live here in this place. I can't survive here. So they do anything in their power to try and control that situation. So we need to also understand that most of the parents did not receive training on this in their adoptive classes or their foster care classes, or if they did, it was something like this. We know you've all heard about RAD. We know you've all heard about childhood trauma, early childhood trauma, but you'll be okay because it's very rare. And, you know, as long as you come in and you're very loving, you're not going to run into this. And that's what we were all taught. And yet here we are. So
Yeah, you think about it in terms of attachment. If it's an attachment issue, oh, we can figure that out. We'll attach to this child. We're a loving, caring family, and we're going to pour into this child, and then that's going to reap, you know, reciprocity from the child in attachment. And so you think you have it because you're attached yourself, and so you think you can overcome this, but you really have no idea what reactive attachment actually
right.
involves. So you're living in it.
Well, and the other thing too is that we did not receive disclosure on anything that any of the child's past. And we understand that because, you know, we want to protect the child, but you're not protecting the child when they have prior abuse, neglect, drug exposure, mental health issues in the family. So then the new parents are coming in totally unaware, totally unprepared, and then they get blamed when the behaviors start up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carrie, I'd like to speak just to a little bit to what you mentioned before about how this is so misunderstood in the counseling world. And I think reactive attachment is often hidden in some of these other diagnoses. You know, multiple personality disorder, split personality disorder, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. You know, so sometimes
PTSD, GAD.
PTSD, yes. I mean, sometimes these other diagnoses can pick up some of the similarities of reactive attachment. But reactive attachment is its own sort of
Yes.
very unique, you know, disorder, all of its own.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't even hear about reactive attachment disorder anymore. Many times they're now using DMDD, which, okay, help me out if I forget what the letters are, but it's dysregulated mood. No, let's see. Something about dysregulated mood.
Yeah, dysregulated mood disorder.
DMDD. I don't know. Anyway.
Right.
It's another one that
Yes.
counselors seem more willing to use than RAD.
Yes.
You know, and I remember at one point, Bessel van der Kolk was trying to get a different one in there, and I'm trying to remember what that one was. Do you know, Amy, what that one was?
Wasn't it just developmental trauma?
Yeah, I think it was just developmental trauma disorder or something like that, or developmental trauma. And that would actually fit so much better because it encompasses the PTSD that the kids are experiencing, but also the other stuff, including the attachment and the trauma. So that would be a better one. But it's just so challenging when parents can't find somebody who will diagnose. And then if they diagnose, they refuse to diagnose with RAD. And it's like, we don't really care. We're not here about labeling kids. That's not even what we're trying to do. We're just trying to help parents get the help that they need. And when there isn't a diagnosis that fits, they can't quite figure out. And like you said, Jen, when there's all these other diagnoses, I know we had several, and another one I want to throw in there is ADHD, which can sometimes look like reactive attachment disorder in certain ways, you know, the hyperactivity and the inability to focus and all of those things. if we don't understand that that might be a trauma issue, you know, and then you put a child on an ADHD medication, it's actually not going to help and may make things way worse. So
Well,
we've
and
seen
I think,
this in the clients
yeah,
that we work with.
exactly. And I think to piggyback on that a little bit, clients that are coming to us, families that are coming to us, have often maybe seen counselors already, and maybe the first time that they've, been to a session with a counselor, just in general, they've already had other professionals that they've encountered that have not believed their story, right? So when they finally get to us, it's like there's this emotion that's coming out of them that finally they are being seen and understood in a way they haven't been before. And that's where the window of opportunity can open up for these families to get the support that they need, that they haven't gotten from other professionals before.
Yes, and in fact, when they have gone to other counselors, we need to explain a little bit of what's going on in the family so that you understand why mom looks so crazy.
Yes.
And why dad looks so checked out.
Yes.
And why the child looks so charming. And
yes.
so that it doesn't make sense to you on first appearance because you've got this cute, intelligent child who is expressing themselves very well and makes perfect sense. And then you've got mom over here who is like, that's not true. You don't understand. And so all of a sudden, as a counselor, you're looking at them going, this doesn't add up. What is going on here?
Right.
And you're
Well,
talking to dad, and dad doesn't really understand. And he might even be siding with the child. And so we've got all of this. Let's explain why this happens. So with reactive attachment disorder, DMDD, developmental trauma disorder, and I'm not using them interchangeably, but there's so many similarities, and counselors don't get this all the time. So if you have a parent coming in wanting, a diagnosis, and these are the kinds of symptoms, or they come in with a prior diagnosis, you need to understand that these diagnoses, this developmental trauma and the attachment issues, impacts the child's ability to handle the intimacy of a family, which means they're going to push away and triangulate the parents. Because if they can get mom and dad off kilter and get a wedge between them, then they feel like they have more control, which feels safer to them, because now mom and dad are not a team. They're not, they're just out of control. Right. And if they can get dad disbelieving mom, because what happens many times is they act one way in front of mom and act a different way in front of dad. Mom,
and maybe even a different way in public.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes. So we've got these multiple personalities showing up in different settings that it's gonna look like crazy town to any counselor that isn't versed in this.
Right. Because they may be fantastic on their sports team, or they do great in school and they're very charming. Not always, but sometimes this happens. And so then they come home and mom is saying this whole other thing. Well, it must be mom. And you need to understand, we've had hundreds of clients over the years. We have been these clients over the years. We've been the mom who has gone in and tried to explain this to a teacher, who has gone in and tried to explain it to a pastor or a coach or a counselor. And we've been the crazy ones. And it's so crazy because you're being gaslit at home, and then you go into a counselor's session where they don't understand. And so, and we get it. I mean, if we had not been through this ourselves, we would see it the same way.
Yes.
But we have. So then you've got this child who is charming outside, and just like you said, Jen, they appear very different at home than in public. Mom does look a little crazy. Mom may be pushing so hard because she has been trying everything in her power to get help for this child, and no one understands. And now things are starting to disintegrate at home. And mom may even, I had a client yesterday whose daughter bashed her head open. And now this child is out of the home, and the therapists are blaming the mom and saying she's verbally abusive.
Oh, God.
Because the first time in the counseling session, the mom was like, wait a second, that's not what, was she just was assaulted by her child. And people don't believe the parents. So we're asking, would you take a few minutes and just say, wow, I don't understand this. I need to just step back for a minute and see if I can understand this disorder and what is really happening here. Maybe mom is telling the truth. Here are some other suggestions. Please don't see the child alone without a parent present, because this creates triangulation between you and the parents now. So the child has already been able to triangulate the parents, sometimes not. And once in a while you'll get a couple that comes in and they are right in line together, and you're going to be more apt to believe them. But many times the parents have been triangulated. So if you then allow the triangulation to continue in the counseling session, this child has won and will not get better. And that's the sad part. You need to work on the child trusting the parents, not you. We're all taught this is about a trusting relationship. Children with developmental trauma, with attachment issues, do not trust easily. They just don't trust. And
well,
so
they've had to do it on their own for so long, right? They've had to survive on their own. So that's the reason they don't want or have a desire to blend into a family. It's too intimate. It's too vulnerable.
yes.
Yes.
And then also they're charming. And so they can come. We've even talked to adults that have had RAD, and they've all said, we know how to manipulate the counselors. We know how to get in there and act like, oh, yes, you're so smart. Thank you for helping me with this. And then they go out of the room and they're like, pfft, and they go right back to the exact same thing. And now they've triangulated the therapist, and now they know they've got mom and dad, and they're not going to get better.
Well, and that's the thing is now they don't feel, they know they're not safe with you because they can control you.
Yes.
So you're not a person who can help me if I can control you.
Yeah.
If you're this is in their mind. If you're that stupid and you can't see it and you can let a 10-year-old manipulate you, then I am not trusting you. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So they've already hoodwinked parents in their minds, and that's how they feel safe. So you're not helping if you're doing that. So we're asking here that you would please, and we know it's hard. We know you've never heard this before, and we know your intentions are good, but please be humble and understand that you have not received the training that you need for this, and that the parents have been living in this very confusing, very upside down world, and they're coming to you for help. And if you don't understand that the trauma came in before the adoptive or foster parents, and that, yes, the parents may have some issues. We all did. We all have had to go through our own set of healing from possibly our own childhood traumas ourselves. And you might see that. And so, yes, they might need some help in that, but understand that that's not just the only issue, is there are these things going on with the child. And we're here to ask that you help the parents get the help that they need for the trauma they're experiencing in their home, because they are being traumatized. They are being gaslit. They are being manipulated. They are being lied to. They are starting to question their own sanity. And they need somebody to hang on to who says, I see it, and I know you're telling the truth. And, sometimes in trauma, we don't remember things exactly correctly, and we don't remember the timeline. And so we have gaps in our memory. Just understanding that and not saying, well, I think they're lying, no, maybe they're confused with the trauma.
Yes. I think also like opening your mind up to the possibility that the child could be, causing physical abuse, like you just described, Carrie, causing emotional abuse and mental abuse within the family. Because I think our society wants to look at every child as never being capable of creating those situations. But in these situations, they often do create that.
Right.
And so then the family is, sort of trying to survive from that behavior that is often unseen outside of the house.
Right. I think the Me Too movement
Mhm.
was really good in many ways.
Mhm.
But also, we know there are women who lie.
Mhm.
We know there are women who will deceive and make up a story and try to like ruin somebody's life. That happens.
Mhm.
And I'm old enough to remember, I think probably back in the 70s or 80s, when there was a bumper sticker that said, "Believe the children." And it was
Mhm.
a bumper sticker trying to get people to be aware that there is abuse happening to kids in homes. And we know there is, and that is true. And so as counselors, you have such a, it's a fine line
Mhm.
of trying to discern what is really happening here. Are those parents abusing the children? There may
Mhm.
have been abuse. It
Mhm.
may be those parents, but it might not be those parents. I
Mhm.
had another counselor or another client just this week who was dealing with another counselor who knew that there had been abuse in the biological home, did not disclose it. Then when abuse started happening in a prior foster family, now here we are in this third family, and they're looking at these parents as if they're the ones doing something. It's not those parents, it's
Mhm.
the prior ones.
Mhm.
And it's so confusing. And so we hold you in high regard because we know how challenging this is.
Mhm.
It's not a fun place to be when you don't know what the truth is, and you don't know, you see the symptoms, you know there's something going on here. We're just asking you to expand your thinking so that you're
Mhm.
getting it right. And
Yeah.
it's not the parents, the adoptive or foster parents who have come in to try to help heal up this child. um, you may need to talk to some of their family and friends, although here again, sometimes the family and friends are blaming the parents as well because the child acts so totally different. And isn't
Right.
it amazing how, because I remember feeling this way, it's like we had always kind of been not put on a pedestal, but people knew we were good parents.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we bring in a child with reactive attachment disorder and everybody's looking at us like, what are you doing? What are you
Yeah.
doing? It's We didn't change from before till now.
Yeah.
And
That's
we've had
Mhm.
that conversation with clients just day after day after day after day. So
Yeah.
anything else either of you would like to add?
I'm sitting here thinking about the developmental trauma piece and the child's brain and just, how we create the pathway, the neural pathways and our behaviors, and then how trauma gives us those automatic reactions. And then if it's a chronic situation, those automatic reactions become the superhighway. And so now we have a situation where our nervous system really is running the show all the time. And the brain is not developing in a way that they can learn what to do when the nervous system's not charged up. And
Mhm.
so they actually feel better in their bodies when there's chaos happening. When you feel poorly, I feel better
Mhm.
because you're not looking at me, and my brain actually knows what to do when my body feels in crisis.
Yeah.
So it's really upside down world, even just when
Yeah.
you're only just talking about the child. But then when you add mom's nervous system,
Mhm.
and mom has been trying all this time, and she's got usually got other kids too, and sometimes biological, and sometimes adopted, and sometimes from other countries, and sometimes from the family of the adopted child who's got this over overactive nervous system.
Mhm.
And she's trying to keep everybody's plates spinning. She's trying to keep everybody regulated, but hubby's not seeing it, or hubby's at work and can't see it, and nobody can believe this is true. It is unbelievable. So, it is an unbelievable situation. Then you just have to really ask yourself, what is the allopathic load that this mom is holding? Like, it becomes overwhelming for her. So then you have to look at her nervous system. So if she's coming in looking crazed and bug-eyed and really passionate about what she's saying, that's her nervous system. She's in trauma.
Yeah,
So
I
now
could,
you've
Amy, I
got
could always
trauma
tell.
mom and trauma child.
Yeah,
And so now the attachment, if anything, is going to be some kind of ripped up, messed up trauma attachment,
yeah,
and really more chaos, right?
yeah.
And so
So
it
good.
makes sense if you zoom out far enough, and
Mhm.
then you also zoom in close enough on
Yeah.
the individual pieces,
Yeah.
and then out on the system, the family system, and what's happened with this child whose nervous system can't be regulated in the way that the other child is able to be regulated. They
Yeah.
regulate in the exact opposite way.
Yeah.
That's so good. And Amy, I just think you're just showing us that this is way more complex than most counselors would be led to believe just at the onset of meeting these
Mhm.
families. You have
Mhm.
no idea how complex it is. I
Yeah.
remember when I was seeing a counselor during the height of our trauma, I was in one time, I was actually there to talk about a different child. And it was several weeks before all of a sudden she says, "Wait a minute, what is going on at your house?" I was like, I had given up on that part. Nobody could help me with that piece. So I wasn't even asking about that.
Mm.
She could not believe the load I was carrying. And then
Exactly.
what she helped me see too was that, like, we all had PTSD from everything that was going on. And it was not secondary PTSD, it was tertiary, or whatever you call first level PTSD.
Mhm.
And what we would see happening is one person would get triggered, and then their response to that would trigger someone else. And then their response would trigger something else. And pretty soon, there's not one brain in the family that is functioning,
Right.
and nobody can
Exactly.
get it calmed down. And we're like,
Exactly.
so that's the question, therapists. How do you
Yeah.
get that calmed down?
Yes.
Yeah.
And get the attachment being formed when there is trauma and abuse and crazy going on in a home. And Amy,
Mhm.
one other thing you mentioned that made me just think of something. We all know what it's like, and we've recognized what it is when a mom shows up to a session and her nervous system is off the charts and she's talking a mile a minute, and
Yeah.
just her voice is up an octave and she's passionate, and we just start breathing
Mhm.
and helping her calm down. We're not listening to how crazy she sounds. We're not basing our assessment on the fact that she's rambling and just going nuts. We're recognizing that she is totally triggered right now, that she has not been believed, that she's scared to death we're going to accuse her, that she's trying to get all the stuff out as fast as she can because she only has this much time and this much money, and if she doesn't get it out and if we can't help her, then she doesn't know what to do, and she's in a total panic.
Yes.
And we've just learned to help her start breathing and calm down, and it's okay. We're not in a rush. We understand, and we're going to help you. We
Mhm.
can't always fix the circumstances, but we can certainly help her. And that's what
Yes.
we're asking you as therapists, would be to
Mhm.
recognize that. We hope this has been helpful for you. Jen, did you have anything else you wanted to add here before we end?
I just wanted to add to that description that picture you just painted, like the second that we can step in then and say, I hear you, I understand this, I believe you. That's when you feel the emotional letdown come from these.
They'll probably start crying.
Probably just start sobbing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because they've been carrying it for far too long.
yeah,
Right. And
Yeah.
when you realize that the child is super afraid, obviously that's charging them up. And then when the child starts um, with mom shopping or whatever, and the batted eyes and the lies to the teachers or Sunday school teachers or whomever, and then now mom's living in fear.
Yes.
What is my child saying behind my back?
Yes.
You can't believe what they're saying. Please don't believe what they're saying. I have other kids and they're going to take my kids. And those
Mhm.
are
and
such
we've seen that
real,
happen too, by the way.
we have seen that happen multiple times. And
Mhm.
so those are very real fears, legit fears that are triggering mom and dad. Like if somebody's threatening or has the power to take your child and they're not, and the system's not believing you, the system sets you up for failure in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
with the lack of education and lack of forthcomingness of all the things. And I know that could be a whole nother thing, but there's legit fear there and legit nervous system arousal and fear. And that's what they're living in, and that's what they're carrying while they're still trying to get everybody to the soccer game and church and,
Make dinner.
scouts and
Yeah.
all the things, and you wash the laundry and all the things.
Yeah.
And so you just really have to back up.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to even add in, we're talking mainly about adult parent-child relationships here, but we've got other kids in the home. And sometimes there's possibly even more than one child at home that has the attachment issues, the trauma issues. There's potentially biological children that are now being harmed, whether it's psychologically, emotionally, physically, by the other children. We've seen numerous cases where now we're needing to treat all of the family, and every person needs to be treated differently because it's
their development, the kids are all in different developmental stages, so they're
different layers of
experiencing everything
attachment.
and they're experiencing everything in those lenses, their particular developmental and connected lenses.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's very complicated. It's beyond a 30-minute podcast for sure.
Yes. And so we just want to encourage you, take these clients on if you can have the empathy, the humility to say, I don't understand it all, but I'm willing to learn from you and I'm willing to learn from others. And you're not going to separate the child from the parents, and you're going to believe the parents and you're going to help them. And you may not be able to solve the situation. That's what we have found is many times we don't have the answers to solving, like how to get everybody healthy with this child in the home. That's why we do what we do. But we don't have to know all of the answers. We have to be able to help people get through whatever their circumstances are with truth, with honesty, and with help for each person, whatever the circumstances end up looking like. So,
well, when you realize that everybody was putting their best foot forward in the beginning, right? So mom and dad were uber loving, and and especially if you're talking about international stuff where they don't speak the same language. If you're talking about our own country stuff, then it's you've got all kinds of neglect and things that happen from drugs and alcohol, which are typically the reasons kids are removed. And so there's so much compassion and so much giving and so much trying to help. And this devolved from there. So
right.
Just to recognize that, this wasn't day one. This has been typically, it's about 7 years.
Yes. I just have to share this story again. I know I've shared it before, but we had our son in a day psych treatment program at a children's hospital for many days one summer. And I came in at the end of the day, and the lead psychiatrist comes up to me. She says, "Now, if you would get down on his level and look him in the eyes, then he would know you care." And this is 8 years in. And I'm just like, put me in the straitjacket right now, and I'll just stay here. Like, is there a room for me?
Not getting it. Yes, you're clearly not getting it.
And so please don't have that attitude with your clients. It's just like, oh my word. Have you tried a sticker chart? Don't recommend that. These things do not help. We are so far beyond sticker charts at this place. This is so complex. And if nothing else, we hope that we've alerted you and made you aware that these are very, very complex situations. It's not as simple as it may appear at the beginning. And you might need to pull in some other help. You might need to refer. You might need to do some research yourself to be able to help some of these families. And we ask that you would, because these families need help. So Thank you
And we're
so
here for
much.
consultation. Absolutely. Call us.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Call
let us
Carrie,
help shed some light. Yeah.
carryotool.com, reach out. We'd be happy to do a consult with you. And yeah, so thank you for taking the time. If you watched this, somebody sent it to you, and I know that they are very, very thankful that you watched it. And yeah, we just hope and pray that this would make a difference. So thank you so much for taking the time. If you need to reach out, it's carryotool.com. Thanks so much for joining us.